naked.
Let's get
Let's-
naked.
Let's eat some spaghetti. Let's eat some club sandwiches.
Naked?
Partially clothed?
Are these lunch items that you're speaking of?
I mean,
Uh,
anything could be a lunch item. It just depends on what time of day you eat it. In my opinion,
It's true.
you can eat the most.
Generally, I think of lunch as
Lunchables.
a smaller meal in the middle of the day. Not quite as big as you can go with breakfast.
For dinner.
And,
Dinner's like
and not as big as dinner.
perfect dinner is like a 3-course.
Yeah,
A starter, main course,
Yeah.
and like a little
little
dessert.
desserty boy.
Lunch is like a hodgepodge.
Yeah.
It can be a bunch of
I
different
want to
it can
have a
be
half
leftovers.
sandwich and like 10 chips.
I
Not
had
10 chips.
I made it.
Stop it.
I made a
Crazy.
sandwich earlier today on a little plate, and then I poured some pretzels out on the plate. It's like, you know what? This is a good little portion.
That's a little
Had a
lunch
little
right there.
had a little drinkable yogurt with it. Got some probiotics in there.
Yep.
Yeah.
There you go.
That's lunch.
And we are going to be watching Naked Lunch.
Bum,
Yeah.
bum, bum.
These people didn't know we were filming them, but they were in the nude, and then I guess they just got hungry because they started nomming down on some stuff.
Yep.
and It was about 12:30ish, so you know
I told them that lasagna was probably a bad idea, but they didn't listen.
They got it everywhere.
it'll scald you.
Yep.
That hot sauce getting
That-
on your private bits.
Yep.
Those meatballs got to go
You're
somewhere.
gonna be picking ground meat out your nethers for days.
It's like the meatballs are indicative of something.
Yeah.
You
Like
said balls and dick and
But really though,
yeah.
Have you guys seen Naked Lunch?
No, I haven't.
No.
You know
I heard about the
Naked
book
Lunch.
in high school. And that's as far as it goes. I had the slightest inkling that it was a movie. Didn't know it was the Crones. The Cronenberg. Not the disease.
Well, Crone made me think of like an old
Oh.
woman, like an old ass
No,
lady.
I jumped to the disease.
Or that it had the fucking Robert Cop in it.
Oh,
RoboCop, Peter Weller.
that is of myself.
You might have a few other recognizable faces. In
Oh, I'm sure. Like Cronenberg, like when I hear that name, Scanners is obviously what I think of for the most part. But so like Naked Lunch, Cronenberg, I was like, okay, I'm down.
They dropped a sick Cronenberg reference in Rick and Morty that one episode. Where like,
They went to Cronenberg Universe.
The Cronenbergs,
Yeah.
yeah. I was like, yep.
um,
I gave a silent, super cheesy. You can't see what I just did,
Just a
but
smile.
it's just a big smile.
he threw his head back in elation and glee
Yeah.
and chortling.
Squinty eyes.
Yep.
Look into the heavens.
Looking at speed up there.
Speed up there, my boy. Doing laps around the universe.
It is he that causes the sun to rise and set.
Maybe a halo circular because it's representing the,
The
track
racetrack,
and it
yep.
goes round. Are we really gonna get back?
We're going back to Speed
I feel
Racer.
like
God
I
damn
feel
it!
like we could.
This
we
movie.
easily could get
We could
pulled
just
into that.
do a theological, analysis
We
of
could do a
Speed Racer
community
one day.
college course.
We could do a Godcast.
Godcast.
It's-
Oh,
No matter what we talk about, we have to bring it into some kind of religion.
yeah. Yeah, sure.
It would make us more worldly people.
This would actually be a religion for aspiring writers. It's a
The
lot.
crony.
It's about a writer. So
Yes,
we'll
yeah.
get into all of that once we watch the film.
Yes.
But you guys are in for a fever dream.
Yeah.
I was
'Cause
wondering
I really-
if you're going to say treat, and I don't know. Yeah, from what you've said, I don't know if treat would be like the right word for this.
I really have. So I've been just prattling on about random shiz because I have literally no information or any knowledge of what this movie is going to be.
And we'll
So
see if you have any information even after the film.
well, not likely.
From the little bit that we haven't even seen of it, but like when you put the movie in and it was on the main menu, some of the stuff that was going through, like with what
like
you've
a
said about
fly.
it with bugs and being about writing, and
shit,
they
yeah.
showed like an image of one of the characters.
Oh.
That's not a movie.
You don't wanna watch it.
Well, yeah, it is a fucking movie, but you push some buttons during it. That we're talking about The Last of Us because he has that inside of his Naked
My
Lunch
system at the time.
cover. Yep. But they showed a main character, or like a character from the movie,
Yes.
who being in
Is it
like
me?
black and white and his like hairstyle and stuff. It was a little bit evocative of like Eraserhead and Kafka a little bit from every way that he's been like portrayed in that story.
Yep.
Of Metamorphosis.
Oh.
With like the bugs and all this other stuff. It's definitely ooky.
Ookie dookie. Ooh,
Ooky
yep.
spooky.
Those are some crony boys.
You guys are in for a treat.
I'm ready.
I said it. You're in for
I'm
a
ready
treat.
to.
He said it, and I don't know if it's true.
All right, let's jump into it, boys. Ready?
He's going
I was
to
born
press
ready.
play on the movie. The movie will start
We are on
playing.
the way.
The movie is not yet. Oh, there it goes. 20th century movie.
I'll get the fanfare.
Nope. It just stands there. Yep.
And now, our feature presentation.
Okie dokie artichoke. Wow.
I warned you guys. I said this one is a thinker, and I
That
don't
was a
know-
thinker.
I don't know. I don't know if you guys are ready for it.
Yeah, it's a thinker. This is less of a this is less of a movie as in a narrative experience that you can follow from beginning to end with like a 3-act structure kind of a thing, and it's more of a long format short story about one thing specifically that's never really named what they're talking about, but they just keep going on talking about it. Like it just goes all sorts of places and never really has a very specific through line that you want to follow through it.
Yeah, my main takeaway from it, from this, I've only seen it now twice. So I saw it once when I bought this film because I heard so much about it, and then this time, I took away that it's the horrors of drug addiction,
Yep.
and that it's a vicious cycle.
Yep.
So everything that happened at the beginning had a mirror image or like an echo at the very end with
Yep.
the cops and these guys at the border being like they seemed like they're a Russian kind of authority of some kind.
Mm-hmm.
They had a different way of talking, whereas like they're played by the same actor
Yep.
or the actors, and that having it be like a cyclical nature of addiction where it's a vicious cycle and things like that is when Ian Holm said that he said something about like a unending paradox, like it's like a you can't escape this
Right.
this universe of what you're doing with your body and what you're doing with all these different drugs that are being exposed to you.
Right. And that's, he said, with the cyclical nature of it, it does get expressed a couple different ways, and with whether it's his wife and then Frost's wife being played by the same actress, and kind of starting that cycle of, you know, like starting over kind of with that same, and then it ending in the same place that it ended with her. And then, and it was a mirror image where it's like she's shot, then then the cops talk to him, and then in the end the cops talk to him, and then she's shot. Like it's like it is that kind of perfect little mirror boy.
Like
And I guess you could say
echo from
that. I mean, they call it anexia or whatever, but like if it's kind of like Russia, I guess you could kind of say Russia's like a reflection. Yeah.
Well, and a lot of the stuff that happens in the movie too, like the main character is a writer.
Yeah.
So there's not really a
He is a writer, but he isn't a writer.
yeah, and like
writers are so like self-destroying, like they're
Yeah.
so into like
they
destroying
put so much of themselves into their work that it's almost destructive. But
Especially that generation of writers.
It's specifically said in the movie that like we want you to write with the typewriter, not in longhand.
Yep.
And he goes through 3 or 4 different typewriters, depending on how you want to count them.
Yeah.
And it's almost like him returning to the typewriter is like his form of drugs in a way, where him as a
Right.
writer, like he has to go back to
Trying
this typewriter.
something different, but it doesn't work.
And it
So he goes
escalates
back to
where
the
he
old-
kind of like he's not getting the same effect from the first one.
Yeah.
So he goes back to a different one, and that one doesn't work out for him, and goes to another one. And then at the very end, like, he almost seemed clean
Right.
at that Anexia part.
Right.
Because he was sharp, he was on it. And Joan
But he still
was,
found he was doomed to repeat himself.
yeah, because Joan was the one in the back of the car who was like surrounded by all the accoutrement
Yeah.
of the things that had kind of plagued him throughout this movie. Like,
Which
there
because
was
he
glasses, there was
started
alcohol.
the movie. He started the movie not on drugs, really.
She kind of pulled him into it.
Yeah. And
And-
so and then he kind of got back out, but then that happens. It's almost like this is gonna start all over again.
Her,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and I was thinking about that because it seems important that the first scene that we meet Bill, he's spraying that bug powder,
Yeah.
and then it runs out, and that's when the cockroaches start coming out.
Yeah.
And then he immediately goes to the place where
To
he
get more.
resupplies or whatever, and he goes to get more.
Like
And
the
then,
drugs they turn out to be. It's kind of like a drug addict running out of drugs. And going to
yeah,
get more.
and like the Asian guy who's like the resupplier just takes the stuff and like by the handful is throwing it in his own mouth and supposedly digesting the stuff right in front of us.
Yeah.
But then later another exterminator says to him like, no, it's just sleight of hand. He's not actually eating it.
Right.
Do you think that's
I wonder if there's any significance in the fact that the dude's Asian too.
well?
Because it's a lot to do. Because he's a lot of his. Because it's the book and the movie itself are fairly like biographical about Burroughs' life,
Mhm.
and he was big into like heroin and stuff like that, and that
Was
comes
he-
from Asia.
Was he a
Yeah.
homosexual at any point, or did he like have an experimentation or any sort of
I don't
like
know. I
conflict
don't
of
remember
sexuality?
from what I was reading.
Like the beat
But they
generation where they did
kind
have
of
that
floated.
free spirit.
Yeah. He, because the other reference, the possible reference to heroin I was thinking of too is the black meat.
Yep.
Because
Black tar.
Black tar, yeah. But yeah, because this movie isn't just based off of the book Naked Lunch, because the book is a non-linear narrative.
Mm-hmm.
That filled with a bunch of vignettes essentially that could be he specifically like intended it to be able to be read in any order you wanted to,
Yeah.
but it's also kind of combined with a biography of his life, which supplies a lot of the like actual narrative for it, like the whole thing with his wife that actually happened, the shooting her during a William Tell thing, and then him fleeing the country, and he was actually like convicted of homicide in absentia when he was sentenced to 2 years, which got like vacated or whatever later. But and like Hank and Martin are Jack Kerouac and Allen Ginsberg, because they were all good friends. And they are those characters in it and their roles within it. Because as well
Ginsberg was the one that was more like
the one with the
flirty,
glasses,
more
yeah,
flirty with him.
yeah,
And
exactly,
Jack
a little more
Kerouac was
touchy.
just like
the more
super into sex and just
Well,
being debaucherous.
and as he said,
All-American, like-
he said like what I'm writing is
All-American.
is all American, whatever. Maybe a reference to On the Road,
yeah.
which also is there's an anagram for Burroughs in that as well. For his character, there's a character in there, it's something Old Lee or something, which is based off of Burroughs. But yeah, so that whole and him going over to Tangiers and all that's all stuff that actually happened in Burroughs' life.
Okay. This is a little bit off topic, but in the middle of watching this, in one of the scenes between Bill and Kiki,
Yeah.
I had a flash of realization that there's a scene in The Venture Brothers where Hank and Dean go to look for Colonel Gentleman.
Yeah.
And they find him in Tangiers, holed up with a little brown man named Kiki. And I'm gonna have to watch that episode again to see if Kiki's wearing that specific necklace or something.
Right.
But it, like,
Could be a reference.
yeah, it's definitely a reference on the Venture Brothers part,
Yeah.
but it also, like, I got a really big feeling that the whole homosexuality part of
Yeah.
it was like an analogy in a way.
I'm sure. Well,
Like,
that's
what do
and
I
it
have
could be
in
just
my
to the
notes here?
the relative openness of the writers of the time, and yeah, I want because like I said as well, not just Naked Lunch, but others of his works were referenced as well. Like he wrote a story called Queer, which the word itself is used quite a bit, and I don't know if it contains any story elements that are similar. He also had a trilogy of books called the Nova trilogy, Clark Nova. Again, I have no idea if Clark Nova.
Clark
Oh, yeah.
Nova is his first real typewriter
Typewriter.
that he receives, which is a
Looks like a
beetle
cockroach, and then like
type entity with
where the wings flap open.
Yep.
It looks like a hairy nutsack with an anus for a mouth
Yeah.
that talks at you.
basically, which
Yeah, it's got
it
pubes all
reminded
over
me
it.
very much with the puppeteering and how it looked and how it talked. It reminded me of the evolution of the arm in Twin Peaks.
Oh yeah,
The
yeah.
fleshy, pink, undulating kind of with the mouth. Yeah, I have in my notes here that I have Interzone as a parallel for
Being stoned.
no, it's
That's part of it is like the drug world is what I kind of
yeah, because
drug world / because every time like Interzone was involved, it was always when he was on the drugs
but then
or having to do with the drugs,
can actually be
free and open. Yeah.
yeah, because like inter meaning between,
Yep.
amongst, amidst, like
Between the worlds.
yeah. So he's going in the movie. He goes through withdrawal. So the interzone is kind of him either transitioning from non-drug use to drug use, or from drug use through withdrawal into sobriety.
Right.
And then part of that also is the confusion of your feelings and your body and your physicality going through the withdrawal or the introduction of drugs.
Right.
And his confusion of, well, I at one point in the past was a homosexual. Now I don't identify as that, but I still inside feel those urges, or
Right.
I recognize that I was that is a part of me. Like he kind of that almost comes out of left field, like the whole homosexual thing, where he's
talking to that one guy.
he's married in the beginning of the movie. He's got this
Kills-
small friendship relationship with these two other
Yeah.
writers, but then all of a sudden his like Clark Nova starts talking to him about it, like that's your deep cover, and
Kills the wife.
kills the wife, goes immediately to Interzone, where he starts being like bombarded with
Yeah.
male presence and
Yeah.
people
Various
pressing on him how
the trio
like,
of guys from the bar with Kiki and the other dudes, Cloquet, like all those.
well, and
Okay, was the one where he actually opened up, saying his whole like diatribe
Yeah,
of things about I used to be homosexual.
and Nova he says to him too, where they have that conversation. I think it was Clark Nova. Yeah, about women being a different species.
yeah,
and their motives and whatever are completely different from men, and like so there is definitely some sort of duality of that going on.
let me ask both of you a question. Was this a horror movie in any loose or strict sense of the term? Would either of you count this as a horror movie?
I'd call it a horror movie in the sense that it showed you the horrors of drug abuse.
Yeah, so I was gonna say it's more of like a psychological
That's what I was going
horror.
Yeah, like existential
Yeah,
horror,
existential
where
horror.
the reality of whoever is telling the story is like having to deal with the reality of I'm addicted to drugs and I'm a homosexual and I don't know how to feel about it, and
Right.
or a closet homosexual who's married and still has these
Trying
urges.
to dampen it with drugs or express it through drugs.
Yeah,
something.
and one thing that really struck me with this movie was the use of color.
Yeah.
Because I noted to the two of you, very early on, there's a scene with Bill, the main character, played by Peter Weller, who he's taken in by these couple of detectives, and they're questioning him about the different stuff happening. And he's against a background of like a green wall, and there's light coming in through a window that's kind of casting him in these very tan, khaki-ish tones.
Right.
And his eyes looked specifically green, and he was like looking into the camera, and it was so rich in the composition of that shot. Mm-hmm. And then there's other times where you've got him walking through the different markets, the inside of that cafe where he kept seeing the frosts, like the boards behind him and all this stuff was very rich in its color. And I just didn't know if that was supposed to be like telling to us, because there were other times where it either went really close to grayscale, or I think there was that one scene where it went completely grayscale, right?
Which part?
One of his little drug-fueled... Maybe that's how I was feeling during this, is kind of like I was so trying to take everything in, but also trying to interpret it at the same time.
Right.
And this is just anecdotal. There was a point during the movie where we kind of paused, and Tyler turned to both of us and said, "I think I need a shot." So we all imbibed a little bit, and it was
take a minute.
Yeah, like this.
It helped me. It helped me.
Yeah, this is not a movie that you want to kind of starkly approach and try to dissect. It's a good one to just kind of watch the first time, not understand anything that's happening, and then digest that and ruminate and think about it.
Right.
Yeah, right now we're going through a bonus feature on the DVD that Tyler brought over of
Criterion Collection.
actual photographs of Burroughs and Kerouac,
Ginsberg.
being...
And Kiki.
Kiki was in one.
Kiki was in there.
Kiki, bring me my slippers.
But, of them while they're in like Tangier and stuff like that.
Yeah, Kiki.
Because the Frost couple were based off of people he had met there as well. The Tom was based off a guy, Paul something, who was a American expat that lived in Tangiers. Paul Bowles, yep. Yeah. And he was an author and whatever that lived in Tangiers for the rest of his life after he left. There's something...
So, from the viewpoint of the movie, do you think that we as the audience are supposed to be Bill? Because we follow him through the movie, and most times in a movie, you have a main character, but the audience still is let on to things that the character does not know. They see scenes with other people that the main character would never know happens, exposition, setting stuff up for the later scenes of the movie. There are definitely times in this movie where we're following Bill through the movie, he's going through his actions, and then all of a sudden it cuts, and it's the next day, and we're being told by the other characters what happened to Bill. Like, oh, you really blew it up at that O'Reilly party.
Right.
And you were entered with the triplets, and we didn't see it at all, but then he still was like, I don't know if I believe you.
He went on a bender, and we didn't get to see things from that perspective as an audience on looking him. Like, we were definitely in his shoes the whole ride. Like, there was not a part without our main character.
Right.
We always followed his perception of things, and we didn't see some
Right.
of the
It's
things 'cause he
almost
blacked
like
out.
yeah. So as I say, it's almost like we only truly knew what was going on when he was like sober.
Or at least present, like physically there.
Well, yeah, and then as he got more like messed up, then you started seeing him as he starts hallucinating and stuff. But then,
It is. It really is.
but then once he goes further, then you don't see anything that happens.
What? That's got to be Cronenberg, the Mugwump, and
Yeah.
Mr. Weller.
Yep.
Yeah, good little group photo there.
Oh, and his character name in this, the William
Lee.
Lee, was the name of the main character in another one of his books called
Burroughs?
Junkie.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, so like Junkie, Queer, the book Naked Lunch, and probably the Nova trilogy too, all kind of he drew elements from into a what they kind of refer to as like a metatextual look at the actual creation of the book Naked Lunch. How all this led to that
We
essentially.
should say that the book Naked Lunch was regarded as unfilmable.
Yeah,
It's like this would never be
Which,
able
to be fair, he-
translated.
didn't film it. You know what I mean?
I mean, I can definitely see why they would say that. From however much of that content from Naked Lunch actually translated over to the book, or excuse me, to the movie without the influence of other stuff.
The real Burroughs meeting a Muggle.
That's yeah, it's definitely
The mugwump too. Again, for like another like Rick and Morty reference, kind of reminds me of Crumbopolis Michael
yeah.
a little bit.
Yeah.
One of the Asian guys.
With at the end, everybody's sitting down in the corners. They're sucking on a stock throat.
Oh yeah, there's so much.
Fellatio.
Well, yeah, so much sexual
Sex.
innuendo through other things. Like there's the part where the mugwumps are chained up upside down and they're like
Vagina on
they're
the
like
typewriter.
filleting his like one of his little headstalks and ooze is coming out. He even calls it fucking jism.
Mugwump jism.
Mugwump jism. And then yeah, the type what he's typing on the Arabic typewriter with Joan Frost, and then like it opens up and then they like he starts essentially like finger banging the typewriter, and it's this big fleshy, and then like the back
Yeah, the
then
back of
opens
it
up and then it looks
has super clear
Very-
vaginal
yeah.
imagery,
and then
like,
all of a sudden just a giant dick
like,
looking thing
yeah,
just
phallic
emerges from it
object
and
comes
rises.
out of it, and it's like stretching out, and
Yeah.
we all were just like,
It's a this,
Then it turns into like a writhing butt.
yeah, it looks like
It
like
jumps
a
on them when they're like.
it looks like if a face hugger grew up to not be an alien.
Yeah, and to me with all the different little
Yeah, that little butt.
tendrils and like appendages coming off it,
And then
and
he
the
was, like,
butt
humping-
shape with
he
the
was
dick
humping 'em.
hanging off of the butt, it was just, and when it was like writhing on top of him,
Yeah.
that was just like to me like symbolizing, you know, intercourse, where it's just a mess of
another drug.
the beast
Well,
with two
yeah.
backs. It's just
Or
the
the
amount of flesh
the-
writhing around together.
could be
and-
the drug and almost sensual feelings of the creativity too,
yeah, that the
because
writing
it all
and-
went off of their
He said,
writing.
yeah, he said like I need her.
Yeah.
She helps me write. I need her
Yep.
to write.
Yep, and he even said something about it during that scene of how sensual it was before he starts, or just as he starts finger banging the.
Like I said, like it's almost like they're doing the scene from Ghost. Where
Yeah,
they're making
yep.
pottery, but they're making art still
Yep.
just by putting their hands inside this
Yep.
fleshy typewriter now, and then they're just like moaning, and it's
Yep.
like, so it's like another Kafka-esque kind of thing where it was a metamorphosis into something sexual. Like
Yep.
This art was turned sexual by them doing it together.
Right.
I wonder if writing and Joan in general is like a slight metaphor on Burroughs' part for like, or Cronenberg's part, whoever it was, for like sobriety and for trying to live like a normal quote unquote life with like the white picket fence, the wife, and I'm starting to sound like Beetlejuice. Like, because he said I can't write without her, and then once in either situation of the movie when she is killed or taken out of the picture, he just goes on a fucking bender and goes downhill, where that spousal relationship and him writing and trying to make a go of it and like being a exterminator is not there anymore. So he kind of just is with he's a ship without a captain. He just goes wherever he feels like he wants to go, back into drugs, back into homosexuality, swinging wildly between the two extremes of this is who I want to be and this is who I am on the inside, with or without drugs. And the drugs just kind of don't help any situation ever.
Nope, and he forgets all about writing a
Naked Lunch.
huge portion of that, and he sends to his friends, and they're like, "Wow, you're gonna be published before we are."
Yeah.
And like they're reading all this stuff. He's like, "I don't remember any of that shit."
Yeah.
Like,
That
keep
just
reading.
happens.
That-
Which you
that
actually
sounds
hear
great.
from a lot of writers was that
They were under the influence.
under the
while-
influence, and they had no idea what they wrote. Like Stephen King did that quite. Like
He was
I
on-
forget what book it was
It's probably
specifically.
it. He wrote
Might have been it.
entirely on cocaine.
Yeah, where he just like went on a huge bender, and then like all of a sudden there's this book here, and he was just like, "Whoa, what the fuck
Well,
happened?"
that's such a thick book that I can see that being the one that came out of that. And then The Shining was his like realization of what he'd done. Like,
Right.
Or it's like the tortures of writer's block too. That was mainly what The Shining was in a writer's eyes or in perspective. I think he said like it was just
well, it was him.
Oh.
me as myself against being a writer.
Another
Well, and he was trying to deal with his own issues with alcoholism and how he had felt in his own mind that he was as a father. Like Jack Torrance was kind of a reflection of his own darkest feelings about himself, being an alcoholic and how he dealt with his son and his family.
Super destructive.
Yeah, like somebody that might have had good intentions deep down, but was taken over by something else completely when alcohol became even an idea in his mind. It took over as being this like, yeah, destructive and monstrous personality almost.
I was gonna say too, something else that presents itself in this movie is Burroughs' belief in magic. Like he was a believer, and for what?
Just like Alan Moore.
Yeah, in a similar way, where it's essentially like chaos magic, where it's stuff brought into being by sheer willpower, essentially.
Yeah, or I think Moore is more into like the more.
Yeah,
He's
well,
more
he's got
into
that-
the alchemy.
Yeah, you like some of that. Grant Morrison's a big a chaos magic guy. His book, The Invisibles, which Matrix ripped off hardcore, is essentially just like one giant sigil. It's pretty crazy, but yeah, like so that made its way into this as well with
Is
the
there
whole
an example?
the Fredela stuff, her being a
Oh,
witch and her
being-
coven and the
yeah,
magic she did
Doing the-
with Jones like hair and all that stuff planted under that plant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She was doing a lot of
Magic.
Her blood, pubic hair, and fingernails, I think she said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or no, whatever that guy was that went in with Frost.
Yeah, it's like Hafid or something.
Hafid
Yeah.
was the name, yep. So, a little bit off topic, but I have in my notes here something that I wanted to relay to the two of you because
Yeah.
I really genuinely think that this is a very interesting piece of information. Roy Scheider, who appears in this movie, for
Dr. Benway.
Dr. Benway, as everybody
The over
Benway, everybody in the end.
in a very true like noir style where it's like he's introduced rather innocently right away and
not
kicks
revealed till the
everything.
very end.
Kicks everything into gear essentially with the black meat stuff.
Yeah.
And then it's revealed he is the, for all intents and purposes, the antagonist of this movie.
Well, it's kind of interesting. The two things I'm going to bring up are related to one another from what you just said.
Yeah.
The first time that Benway shows up, he's not even that like benign. He seems like he's more in tune with the things that they're discussing than we know. So that's like interesting that he pops back up later on.
Right.
But Roy Scheider himself, when he was younger, he was a boxer in New Jersey
Right.
from 1946 to 1943. And he basically did it just to lose weight. But his sort of iconic face shape with like that very flat, broad nose is from his boxing. And he actually, for those 3 years that he was boxing, he ended up holding an 8-1 win-loss record where he was virtually undefeated and then went down in like I think the 29th round in his like
Jesus.
second to last fight in his career.
Damn.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
How what was the year gap or what was the
1946 to 1943. He was, or excuse me, 1946 to 1949.
Okay.
He was very young, little boy.
And he just
Damn.
did it for
He did it to lose weight. Because growing up in New Jersey at that time, he didn't see that many things he could just, with no training, no education, get involved in. and he saw sports as that kind of thing. So he did a little bit of football and a little bit of amateur boxing. I don't think he ever gained enough reputation to get a nickname, but he that boxing career ended up influencing his entire career as an actor, where he would take these roles that seemed unwinnable, like All That Jazz, or something like this, where he goes from playing the French Connection even too, where he in Naked Lunch he goes from playing like a more straight-laced kind of not reserved, but just normal-ish book type doctor to somebody who in the end is being flamboyant and suggestive and and he's very smoke with the smokiness of the cigar and the deep cover. He's very much like a Dr. Moreau meets Dr. Evil, kind of you don't know where he's gonna go next, but it's always got some sort of aspect of, hey, I'll take you in the back and I'll either make you a sandwich or suck your dick kind of vibe to it.
Yeah, you couldn't tell. By the end, you're like, when is he gonna come back? You kept thinking they keep talking about Benway. Whenever they say Benway, it's like, oh, he's right over here. Oh, he's over there. It's
Benway.
When is he gonna show up?
Benway dealt in the black meat,
Yep.
which was in the movie described as a
Cure-all.
gigantic aquatic centipede
Brazilian
off
centipede.
off of the coast of Brazil.
Yep.
So
It's supposed to cure your addiction too. Like you take a little bit of this mixed with the stuff you already have, the bug powder basically. You mix the bug powder with the black powder, and then you're supposed to kick the habit. But it actually just makes you addicted to the black stuff.
yeah, it almost made it seem worse because at some points he was just topically taking this black powder and pressing it to his neck around the injection sites from when he was shooting up, and I didn't know if that was supposed to be.
Was that the black meat or was that the black powder? Or is that because they gave him the jam at the diner? The Frost gave him that little jar of jam, and they're like, oh, you just use this paste and you put it on your toast and stuff, and he took it, or basically Joan gave it to him, and then
Right.
the first time we see him do it, he just kind of just rubs it, and then he's like, oh shit, and he hears his typewriter just chirping over there, and then he
Right.
starts seeing you can
I'm
tell
sure-
the typewriter is going to come when he does a drug,
Right.
or the bug guy.
There's some more kind of backstory.
Just because I started it, it's kind of interesting how sometimes life imitates art.
Yes.
Where in 2016, a researcher found a real aquatic centipede off the coast of East Asia, which was a dark greenish black, like a dark meat like that,
Yeah.
that was actually described by the researcher as grotesque and horrific looking. So it's almost interesting that we have this movie that centipedes are a huge motif.
Yeah.
And there are even characters and objects that reflect that. And then later on-
Cloquet turns into a weird centipede when he.
Yep, Cloquet, and Joan. They said that she was a high-level centipede or something like that. So it's just interesting that later on in life we happen to find this thing that is also a dark, colored, aquatic centipede that they haven't really done too much research because they only found so many rare specimens. But
Yeah, and it was an evolution of these drugs. They start with powder.
Yep.
The powder evolves into this black stuff.
Yep.
You find out that you go to this Tangier's place and they're cutting up these in this butcher shop or this butcher abattoir,
it's-
whatever it was.
it's
they
very-
were peeling off the centipede's husks and then chopping them up.
It's very much like a drug den though, where they're
Yeah.
cutting and all the powders and stuff.
Yeah, they're
Cutting it
grinding
up
it
and
down,
yeah.
and you actually saw a picture of them feeding it through a meat grinder.
Yep.
And it was going out and coming out in little compact pieces, and
Yeah.
then it graduates from there to being jism.
Yep.
So was the mugwump jism an evolution of the black meat, or was it related?
I think it's
at all, or
just another-
Another level of a drug.
Okay.
Because there was 3 main drugs that
You gotta be
Burrow
careful,
was.
Bradshaw. You gotta be careful with this guy. You're super touchy and
That Burrow. Well, there's 3 main drugs that Burrow was doing at the time. I believe at least a couple of them, but one was which they actually do call it by its real name, which is the Majun, the hash pasty whatever thing.
Yeah, that's the stuff then.
And then some German thing called Eucadol, and then I think heroin. So that those may all just be representative of those things that
Yeah,
he
not
was
straight
doing.
out saying them, but they were like, they
Yeah.
helped him and they inspired artistry and
Right.
inspired his creative juices.
So couple like background things that feed kind of directly into this movie as well. Burroughs credited his wife's death with kickstarting his writing, which that's kind of the sequence of events in this too, where she dies and then he starts.
Writing Naked Lunch.
Yeah, and then the whole thing with Tangiers. He went there on his own, and he stayed in a home owned by a known procurer of homosexual prostitutes for visiting American and English men. So that might be where some of that stuff
That
kind
might
of.
be where some of the.
And then he rented a room and began to write a large body of text that he personally referred to as Interzone.
Wow.
So some of that was all kind of birthed in that area too.
Yeah.
So literally like the birth of Interzone being in Tangiers, where he is in this, and that is where he calls Interzone, is within that realm in Tangiers kind of.
I think that's definitely kind of telling,
Yeah.
because the word inter and what you were talking about with his different pieces of writing, that, what did you say the word, a
Metatextual.
metatextual narrative
Yeah.
in that way very much fits this movie, because it feels like we're watching a dream, but we don't know if we are the dreamer or if Bill is the dreamer.
Right.
And we don't know if we're really following like his nightmare or some kind of.
These bugs and these typewriters are actually
What's real and what's not.
helping gear the story towards this
Yeah.
really espionage style, like, you gotta write up this report, you gotta send the report in, you gotta do it, Bill.
Right.
And they're like, what report are you talking about?
Right.
You just gotta get in there, you gotta go deep cover,
Right.
get this done for
An
us.
agent, which is also like that whole
Yeah, it's like, it's some kind of Red
the-
Scare. It's some kind of like
the Lee thing. The
super huge into Russian espionage stuff.
What was it? William Lee, is that his name in the? But that character from that book was like Agent Lee or whatever, doing stuff like that as well.
And like the Clark Nova was telling, like, he specifically said homosexuality, like, that'd be a really good deep cover, nobody will suspect that.
Yeah.
But then when he got the Martinelli,
Yeah.
we saw a side by side of the two typewriters next to each other, and in one of them he had typed like, "Please help me, I need to get out of here. There's something weird going on here. I don't know what's happening." And then the other one was the report that he was typing.
Right.
And the Clark Nova said, like, you were telling her your most.
I was gonna say, I don't know if it's worth
Inner-
noting, but the Martinelli was a woman too,
Yeah, and so like
or female.
the homosexuality aspect of it was like, we can't trust women with these secrets. We can't tell them how we're feeling.
Right.
You don't need to acknowledge those feelings that you're having. You just need to do what I'm telling you. You need to be under the influence of these drugs and do what I'm
Dampen
do
it
what we're
away.
feeling.
Put it away. Put it away.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's,
So less thematic and plot talk, more general movie talk.
yeah.
We
he
already
did-
talked a little bit about the color.
Right.
Beautifully shot movie. Not very much like interesting camera work, I'd say, but it's
Pretty
definitely
straightforward for the most part.
Yeah.
There was some interesting angles, I guess, here and there. Not a lot.
not. It was
Like stark,
Yeah.
like shadow and like
Yep.
harsh shadows, stark light coming through.
Yep.
There's like they did really well with those sets in Tangiers, where like they just had really ornate pillows and rugs on the ground, where it made it look like it was lived in and from that part of the world. Like
And
it looked really cozy.
Yeah, and I don't know if it was a conscious choice, but once in Tangiers, like all the dudes were just in like off-white suits, every single one. Cloquet, I call him Croquet.
understandable.
Cloquet, Frost, Kiki was wearing a lot.
Yeah.
Even
frumpy looking, like
Yeah.
really baggy. And
yeah, and even
zoot suit style.
even William too, and then the parts where you'd find him in the sand, and it'd be like their suits were like the same color of the sand, like
There's one
all
thing.
brown. That light that
Brown.
brown.
There's one thing that I noticed in the movie that I haven't heard either of you say it, and I
Yeah.
don't know if it's anything to pick up on or just something that I noticed and kind of maintained. When we first see Kiki in the Interzone,
Yeah,
he's drinking that exact same drink, like the nectar-ish, yellowy, viscous liquid out of the exact same container that the mugwump was drinking in the bar in America.
Oh.
When he's in the background and he's talking to Hans, he's like, and then Kiki comes over and they start talking about the frosts. When Kiki's in the background with the other two, he's drinking through a straw out of the exact same container, the exact same fluid that the mugwump is drinking.
And you noticed the mugwump behind Kiki.
yeah.
Oh, I noticed.
Before he was introduced.
I noticed that immediately.
You're
Like
like,
this,
"What the hell
the
is that?"
second that scene started, I was looking around the frame and I was like, just completely silently to myself, I was like, "What the fuck?" Like,
Right.
All you can see is like a little beak and the spine.
Yeah, his little stalks coming up back there.
Did you like the creature effects?
Yeah,
it was beautiful.
I love the typewriters and the way
Yep.
they talk. They just had that like raspy, like they smoked like 12 packs a day.
Yep.
Just
He almost sounded like, and
I want to see a movie just about the mugwumps too.
Yeah.
like, it's like a very, very interesting like
the
race of dudes.
especially Clark
They were all dudes too.
Nova. Do we know who Clark Nova was voiced by? Because I know that it wasn't, but it sounded like John Hurt with
Right.
that raspy, like kind of, and with the accent. And one thing also that's kind of interesting about how they shot this was we could be going through a scene where the entire scene, the typewriter is depicted as one of the bugs.
Right.
But then like it'll jump off the table and it kind of scoots towards the door and somebody closes the door before it can get there, so it bumps into it. And when it does the bump, you hear the ding of the typewriter.
Yeah.
Or there are other times where we've watched an entire scene with the bug and then it gets dropped on the ground or something, and when it's on the ground, it's just a typewriter or pieces of a typewriter. So are we to interpret that this is them viewing things in a skewed way because they're on drugs, or is it actually kind of half and half, like it's in between? Is it half? Is it 1 foot in one world and 1 foot in the other, or is it one or the other? Like that's something.
Right. Well, cause like when Martin and Hank show up, which actually happened in real life too, Kerouac, and as you saw in those pictures, they came over to help him with it. When he hands them the bag, which you saw earlier saw as him putting the innards of this dead thing in there. They look in and you can hear clearly that it's like stuff knocking together and metal and whatever. But then when they like reveal what's in there too, it's not the typewriter. It's an ass ton of drugs,
Pill
and
bottles,
paraphernalia.
syringes, like just
So is that-
as many things as you can think of for drugs?
Again, with that, then is that
Do you remember what he says about what's in the bag? Like they ask him, "What's in? Is this your writing thing?"
He says a writing machine.
This is like what I've been writing with.
Oh yeah, and then it's the
It's the
drugs.
drugs. He's
So I was
been
gonna say
writing on
too,
drugs.
is if the looking in and seeing drugs, just being that allegory essentially. But yeah,
I know that this aspect of the movie was there, but I can pretty confidently say I don't remember a single second of it.
yeah,
Is the score of the movie.
Howard Shore.
yep.
I just like
It was very.
I can like imagine it in my head, but looking back at certain scenes, I don't remember any music, and that's
There's no motif.
well, maybe that was because like the visuals and the dialogue and the themes of those scenes were so strong that the music just acted like John Carpenter, where he like wanted it to be just like wallpaper, where it's not something you ever notice, it's just there, and the rest of the scene informs what the scene is, and the music is just there as like a baseline to keep everything held up a little bit. You know, like when you're looking at
safety net.
well, yeah, like when you're looking at like a bar graph with an X and Y axis, you're looking at the progress of the graph. You're not paying attention to the increments of the X axis. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you're seeing the peak and fault and all
Right.
that stuff. You're not looking at like the percentages or the numbers in between them.
One thing I noticed too about it was back towards the beginning when he's still exterminator or whatever. There's a line when he asks him about the whole censoring yourself, whatever, through rewriting, and then his comment was exterminate all rational thought. So it's like
That's what he's telling the audience.
yeah, exterminate all
Get
rational thought.
out of your head in this movie.
Yeah, well, and just like,
In
and
this
that could be
story.
like and also part of the symbolism of him being an exterminator is trying to exterminate the rational thoughts going on in his head
'Cause,
about himself.
I mean,
or
yeah,
what it
yeah.
is, you
Because
know?
like realistically,
That's really insightful.
yeah, like his rational thoughts would be, I'm a drug addict, I'm a closet homosexual, I have a lot of stuff to deal with.
Right.
And yeah, like also like thematically for the movie, once we kind of move past that point, rational thought's gone. There's nothing
Yeah.
to like hold on to as like a normal scene.
Right.
There's nothing.
So the guy who did all the creature voices in this movie is the guy that he was eating with at work that one time when he's talking about losing his stuff, and the guy's like, "Did you take mine?" Like,
Or you're like, yeah, were you
the
trying to
older,
take mine?
yeah, that guy with the longer hair and whatever. He's the guy who does the voices for all
Was
of
that
those.
that GIF that you sent? That looked like the guy that.
And that was from like that old guy, the old crusty guy doing the thumbs up. But-
picture of him? Let me see that picture.
Just a second, I was looking up what you.
I'm
were
not
talking
sure
about.
what the source is of the gift, because earlier in our group chat about what we have for our recording, I sent a little reaction gift to the two of these dudes about
It looks sort of.
being ready for the thing.
Oh
It's
yeah, it does
an
kind of.
old bearded man giving two thumbs up. I think that's from a movie.
Like a Coen brother movie, maybe.
Yeah, I really do think so, because it's somebody like giving orders to this old curmudgeon guy, and he just and like gives that reaction. It'd be nice if there was a source. Oh, what's that in the right of the frame?
It's like a hookah.
It's somebody stepping.
It's in the foreground.
You know what it is? You know what it is?
No?
That is from Deadwood. That's the old.
Oh, yeah.
That's the old caretaker guy
Yep.
at the
Oh.
Gem.
Or.
No, like
No,
the
at,
hotel that P.T. Barnum owns.
Yeah.
Oh.
Not P.T.
It's
his name is
it's-
Barnum.
Yeah, but it's
But
It's
yeah,
not the
similar
gem,
to
and
that.
that's
the
what
other-
it. That's
Yeah.
what it is on
It's
the right side of the frame. Is that actor coming into frame a little bit?
Farnham. It's Farnham.
Farnham. Yes. Pete. E.B.J. Farnham. E.J.
E.B.
E.B. Farnham. E.B. Farnham. We got there, folks.
We did it.
We did it.
A little bit
There
of a
you go.
path. We got there.
But I digress.
Yeah, this whole thing has been. We definitely have a lot to say about this, and there's definitely a lot of thoughts rolling
Well, it's
around
so
in our
fresh
head.
in our head too that it's like something that like
it's not like a speed racer.
No.
It's not like a house.
No.
It might be a little bit more like a house to the depth you can go with it. but,
Yeah.
like we kind of forced our perceptions of Speed Racer as far as the allegories of Jesus
Right.
and things like that. But this is like straight up a writer's descent into drug abuse.
So I was gonna
and
say it's a lot more
based on reality.
it's a lot more like writing heavy than like House is though, because there's moments in this too where he goes like there's that one car ride he's in where he goes into almost like what seems like a full on like prose passage or like a not quite a beat poem but something like that where because he even throws in like a can you dig type or like a dig it type
feel,
yeah.
you dig,
you
the-
dig
you
and it was
cats.
just this and it was
Yeah.
just this whole like kind of diatribe. It was the thing about the asshole when he's
Yeah.
doing the whole thing about the head and the asshole thing and the how the asshole eventually takes over and shuts the brain down and
That's
whatever.
right. You
That
have to-
whole story
It
is
was
just like
basically
a
just him. Was he telling that to Joan?
mm,
In the car.
I don't know if it was no. He was telling that to.
Was he telling that to his friends?
Yeah, I think he was telling it to Hank and Martin.
Okay. I just remember so many times he breaks out his own like prose or his stream of consciousness type of beat poem.
During the scene where the Martinelli comes alive, he was reciting the poem that was said at the beginning when Hank was sleeping with Joan on the couch. It was the same poem because he was talking about God, what were some of the words? Like, yeah, I can't remember any of the specific words, but it was the same one. I know that for a fact.
I could probably get the
The
style down or
right.
the cadence because I've actually read this poem and I
Right.
want to see if you guys maybe know it.
Know the title or like?
Yeah, I'll tell you
Do
the
you-
title in a bit.
Do you think the because
I saw the minds of my generation destroyed by madness, starving, hysterical, naked, dragging themselves through the Negro streets at dawn looking for an angry fix. Angel-headed hipsters burning for the ancient heavenly connection to the starry dynamo and the machinery of night. Like that.
Yeah.
It's a poem called Howl, but in that style, like he just paints this broad picture of like what he sees in like downtown New York, and he's just like
such
stream
like
of consciousness.
Yeah, so I was gonna
side.
say a stream of consciousness, just like boop.
Listen or read Howl, and there's been a movie.
Yeah, yeah. I was thinking too, after I read that bit about him and Tangier staying in the house that was like a homosexual like brothel essentially, where they loaned out to all the visiting tourists and whatever. Do you think that the whole scene part with Kiki and Cloquet, where like it almost seems like Cloquet was like preying on him, and that was like a commentary on like drug fueled essentially like
Going to
exploitation of these people.
Well, yeah, it's
like,
the sex
like
trade
a
and
drug-fueled
drug trade.
kind of rape.
You
of
go to
sorts.
these places because they have no laws.
Yeah,
You can prey on the.
because he's going into his head, like into his mind,
Well, and they sort of
and and he turns into like a centipede, which has been kind of indicative of the drugs throughout that movie.
they kind of clue you in on that a little bit earlier when he's like when the normal Cloquet is like just
Yeah.
touching Kiki. He's
Oh, yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
He like
He's
puts his
very
hands on him
predatorial
and then
with him.
like gets in close as if he's going to devour him, but
Yeah.
he starts like kissing the back of his neck or something.
He
like
gets
that.
frustrated
Yeah,
frustrated that he's not complying essentially.
Yeah, and like Kiki pulls away like, no, I don't want this. I don't feel comfortable with this. Like I don't want to go through that experience.
yeah,
just wants that
which
bird.
maybe is. Could it be? Oh, we're gonna get.
Well,
Could
I
it be
actually,
like an allegory for freedom, like birds?
well, and I was also thinking
Right,
birds
that
are a
is, like-
natural predator of bugs,
Well,
which
that
is a
too.
huge motif in this movie. And Kiki is so interested in the birds. He's like, "Would you like to go to my room?"
And he
see
makes a
few more
comment
birds?"
about how he has these birds caged
And they have
And
their coital
thing
relation
as
thing.
he's caged in there. So it's like with the birds. So it's like caging, like taking away his freedom, in the same kind of symbolic sense of
He's trapped.
of the trap of being involved in this like sex trade in.
So
Tangier.
there are a lot of metaphors.
There's a lot
and-
of things
and a
you
lot
can
of
think of on.
There's a lot of imagery to
Yeah.
take away a concept and like maybe a thought process that went into the writing of it. Like
Right.
he had these emotions that you can only convey in that super out there style. Like you have to show
Yeah.
people as like a predatory insect invading their minds and
Right.
trapping them in this bird cage so they can't get away and be free. So
Which-
it's like that imagery like really invokes. You're like, whoa.
Which
A hell of a job by Cronenberg to like
Oh.
take the idea of Naked Lunch, not directly adapt it, but craft this very Burroughs way of looking at the rest of all these things that play big parts in all of his works.
I think
All the insight involved. I mean, obviously, it seemed like he'd had to have talked with Burroughs quite a bit.
yeah.
He was an advisor on this.
Okay,
like he was
cool.
on set.
So they were bouncing ideas. I'm sure.
And very possibly Cronenberg is maybe the only person who could take something unfilmable like this and talk to Burroughs and become more intimate with the themes and the ideas that Burroughs was talking about in his
Yeah.
book
Right.
and translating that visually, because like you said, like how do you visually talk about and depict these ideas that Burroughs might have brought up in his book of like
That come
the
out-
predatorial nature of somebody taking advantage of a victim of drug abuse
Yeah.
and somebody dealing with their own sexual kind of struggles.
Yeah,
and
all these experiences that fueled his, because he was over there in real life over in Tangiers for 4 years writing Naked Lunch.
Yeah.
So like in that time, all to condense and create something symbolic of important things he learned and applied in said writings over those 4 years, like that's some shit, dude.
There's a lot to talk about here, folks. There's
There's
a
way
lot of
too much.
ideas. There's a lot of themes.
We covered a good
Yeah.
portion
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
what we thought the movie was.
We
and-
could go on for a long time and keep thinking of things randomly.
Yeah, like
throughout,
our
but,
whole
like,
discussion here is, I think, I would be interested to hear from anybody listening to this podcast where they have never watched this movie. They listen to the podcast first and then watch the movie, or vice versa. They watch the movie and then listen to the podcast, because it might help inform your viewing of it just slightly to have an idea of where to jump off from. But please don't let this be something of we're telling you the themes and telling you
No,
the ideas.
that's just what we saw in it.
There are specific topics that are covered, but it's nothing that I think you should let inform your viewing of this, because it is very. I would, as a piece of film, I would absolutely call this art, because
Oh, yeah.
you have spectacular performances from Peter Wells, from Ian Holm,
Weller.
from Wells, yeah,
Weller.
Roy Scheider, like everybody in this cast, whether I know them or not. And there are people that the three of us, I think, individually picked out as like, hey, I recognize that person. And like, this is a very specific,
dude, that was a factory
iconic
worker in Tommy
piece
Boy.
of art of film.
Yeah.
Like, if I was either a English teacher or like a literature teacher or a film professor, I would probably suggest this as something to watch, to study, because there's so much to pick
Even like
apart.
a psychology teacher.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
like what can you analyze from this? What can you pick out? What pops out to you?
Yeah, like there's nothing.
What does
and
this say?
All a Rorschach test.
Yeah.
for
What does this say
psychologists.
about not only what he's trying to express, but what's your mind is?
So I think I know the answer
Tuning in.
for you, Tyler, but I'm curious for the three of us. Would this be a recommendation of a movie to show Tom Joe on the street?
I'll say yeah.
I-
I just like exposing people to
Right, that's what I was gonna say.
different like avenues of the film media. This is totally a bizarre, out there, not your typical run of the mill blockbuster that you'd see. It's like
Yeah.
really under the radar style filmmaking, and Cronenberg is like a master of his craft.
Right.
And what he does really well. And like if you watch any Cronenberg, you're like, oh yeah, that aesthetic is just like top notch, and it's like
Right.
it deserves to be viewed because he's such an auteur himself.
Right. It's one of those that like I know inherently that a lot of people wouldn't be able to get into it, but like just out of the merit of, dude, this is something different, incredibly different from what you're used to, and just like this
need
is
to
what things can
cleanse
be.
Cleanse your palate
Yeah.
of the sensory overload style like action films
Right.
that are out there. It's like this is more super low
And it's
key.
an experience kind of.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just like I always refer to like
your own drug.
when I first saw like Drive, like back at Comic-Con in 2011 or 12, I had no idea what the movie was. I just knew Ryan Gosling was in it. It was directed by the dude who did Valhalla Rising, Nicholas Winding Refn, which I had not seen but had heard of, and it was called Drive. So I was like, okay, so it's gonna be some like driving movie with Ryan Gosling in it, whatever. And then going to it and seeing it and then just being like, holy shit, like this was not what I expected at all. It was an experience because I had no idea what I was getting into. And that's kind of like this was like, I have no idea what I'm getting into with this. And then it's just like, woo. And then it sucks you in. Like you really feel like you're in the world and you're just like, whoa.
being so quiet.
Yep.
In that film, Drive is such a quiet.
Oh, yeah.
Until it gets loud,
Yep.
and then it kind of goes back down.
Character doesn't have a fucking name. The main character has no name, except the driver. Hardly talks at all. But it's
Stares
yeah.
for a long time.
Yep.
And that, yeah, I think we should probably do Drive as like an episode of Reel to Reel because we definitely have a lot to say about it.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a superhero movie.
yeah, like it's a fun movie that I think we all know we're gonna enjoy, but there's stuff we could pick apart about it. This is gonna be my effort at a last venture into the thematic and the ideas.
Yeah.
Before we kind of wrap this thing up. Do you think that Naked Lunch, that title, might be chosen because naked?
Got some insight.
Yeah, like the human body being completely stripped of all clothing, being naked is so vulnerable.
Yeah.
It's so personal for a lot of people. And also the act of like eating, sustaining ourselves, doing what we need to do to fuel our body to continue living is a slightly personal, like also kind of vulnerable aspect of humanity.
Right.
Where that's something where somebody like it's something that we need to do. So if somebody were
It's something we're truly vulnerable in doing too.
yeah, like if somebody were to just
Our
walk into
guards
your
down.
apartment and drop a little bit of rat poison in your spaghetti,
Right.
you wouldn't know, and you'd still eat the spaghetti because you need to do that to live. But it's
The
a
spaghetti.
very personal, yeah. Like, and there's a lot that goes into cooking, just
Yeah.
like writing and stuff. So Naked Lunch is probably, in my mind, this is my interpretation of it, like a representation of here's a look at something, a story that is very personal, that is very sensitive and very volatile.
That is, yeah, and that's a great analysis of it. That does actually really ring true. I know when I was reading the background stuff, it said that originally he had titled it Naked Lust,
Makes sense.
but Kerouac misread his writing and said Naked Lunch, and
Their writing
Burroughs
is atrocious.
Burroughs
If you look at their
yeah.
film form, like that
Burroughs
writing-
loved it, liked it, and used it.
So
And,
it must have rang true to
in some, yeah, in some,
degree,
yeah,
to, like, latch on to that misinterpretation.
right. Because that what you pointed out there is a really good, really insightful,
Really insightful, yeah. Like you can take those two words and just derive
so much
every
meaning.
meaning.
Yeah, and I think that's important in art. Period, especially, but you know,
It's like
in
a
both
title-
visual.
I can see that as a title of a painting. So
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
Like both
yeah.
both visual and non-visual is the not exactly what the person who created said art meant with it, but what you draw from it and what you can see from it makes that art more personal to you and makes it something that you know for you to grasp essentially.
That's the definition of art is supposed to be
Yeah.
subjective.
Yes.
Holy shit.
Surely hit.
When you said a piece of art, like, I mean, obviously that is indicative to this whole discussion, but it made me think of like a framed painting on a wall of two nude people sitting across from each other at like a bistro style
Yeah.
little table, just eating a couple paninis or something like that.
Just little
completely
paninis.
nude. And that made me think of the scene of Billy Crystal and
Meg Ryan.
Meg Ryan in
When Harry Met Sally.
When Harry Met Sally, where they're having that very intimate discussion in the middle of a crowded New York
Never
deli.
faked
And and she starts
And
moaning and
it's
shit.
a very like that. Watching that scene, it's
I don't know
funny.
what she's having.
Like it's almost cliched by this point, but it
Right.
really is.
But the reason why it's cliche.
tender, like a reactive topic being shared between two people while they're enjoying their little grub. Like I think he's got a little Reuben or a Rachel or something that he's eating, and
Yeah.
like, she's just
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It just pops in my mind.
No, I can see that. That's their naked lunch.
Yeah.
So
Their feelings are laid naked.
yeah, laid bare for all to
Laid
see.
bare for
They're
all
talking
to
about
see.
something so intimate
Yeah.
and
such a public setting.
But that's such a it's
He was
a
asking for it.
but it's such a thing, like the idea, not the idea, but a thing with like eating with somebody is it's a intimate thing. That's why it's such a staple of a date is going to dinner.
Let's go eat food
It's
together.
yeah, we're eating food together, discussing who we are as people.
Yeah,
Essentially, it's
we're
an
gonna
intimate
be-
thing. Family dinners, like all that.
Yeah.
It's a very personal and intimate thing. So it's a
Well, and,
You know.
and like the tradition of doing a cheers or a
Yeah.
what would you
Like we toasted.
yeah, like a toast. Clinking the glasses together has been attributed to like making sure that if somebody had poisoned your drink,
yeah,
a little bit would slosh over into theirs, and you'd
Yeah.
be sharing that imbibement with others just
Right.
in case. So like that is another very like sensitive thing. Like you're sitting down together, you're sharing these things about yourself, and with the toast and the involvement of two people in this one meal,
yeah.
it's an invitation of like.
Well,
share this
especially
with
if-
me, join me,
Well,
in this.
especially if you're the one cooking it too,
Yeah.
because that's an even more personal touch, an even more intimate thing. Because cooking also is very from who you are as a
That's why
person.
things taste better. Like if you go to a friend's
It's cooked
house,
with love.
If you go to a friend's house and they make spaghetti and meatballs,
Some spagooter.
and you're like, this doesn't taste like how my mom makes it.
Yeah.
And then you have your mom make it. It's like so much better.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because she's I don't know, it's that secret ingredient,
Yeah.
or it's just because your mom
Yep.
puts everything into.
Yeah, right.
For you.
Yeah, like that's something that is kind of selfless to a point.
Yep.
Where you're making it. If you're making it to feed other people, you're kind of taking their tastes and their thoughts into it. Like,
Well, and the idea of using your own time and resources specifically for somebody else.
and that's what writing is.
Yeah.
For the most part, like it's either about what.
And
other
it's
people
both-
have
it's both
informed in you,
Just like cooking, it's both very selfish and selfless at the same time.
Not just writing in general, just art.
Yeah.
Because all encompassing.
Because it's indulging yourself, but also
It's
reaching out to others.
Reaching inside of you, finding your vulnerable aspects, and then trying to express it in that medium, whether it be painting
Right.
or writing. You're throwing your emotions out on the page for other people to connect with and take away what they can. from
Right.
it.
It's selfish in its creation, selfless in its
production.
in its release or whatever.
Well, because a part of that even is how other people in your life have affected how you feel about it.
Yeah.
So you personally, what you're putting into it is somewhat influenced or informed by the other people around you that you are then returning that to.
Yep.
So if you have somebody
It's a
like
filter.
a significant other that has helped inform your emotions and your feelings for a long time, and you produce
Like
this,
Joan.
yeah,
Yep.
you produce this piece of art, it's going to reflect to them to a certain degree. Like if they know the artist and they know, and then they're then looking at the product there, they're gonna see like maybe a reflection of themselves to some
Yeah.
degree.
Yep.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Well-
we can dive headlong into
Psychoanalysis.
psychoanalysis and art and all that, but overall, Naked Lunch made us go down a path that
It's thought provoking.
it totally provoked so many thoughts.
Yeah. If it encouraged discussion, like it's kind of a perfect movie for this type of situation
Where you
because
have to watch it with the group and then
yeah,
discuss it. It's like
break it down.
It's like having a book club.
Yeah.
Everybody reads a book and they talk about like, oh, my favorite part was this.
Right.
But you can like totally go all out with this.
What was your favorite part of Naked Lunch, the movie?
Racha, you said.
My favorite part.
Your favorite scene, your favorite part, whatever it was.
My favorite part. Well, probably is just that whole scene of that butthole story. I know it's
Which
it's
Which
a
scene?
it's
Yeah,
a,
he talks-
a stereotype that I would like something
Right,
having to do with
butthole.
buttholes because I find buttholes hilarious. But
like in the car.
the car where he's
Okay,
telling
yeah,
that story
yeah,
about
gotcha.
the asshole
Yep.
and that whole thing that
I had to ask that because like,
yeah.
imagery and stuff was
Yeah.
so prevalent.
There's
throughout the movie.
there's a lot of buttholes going
Yeah.
on, but that was like really like a standout because it obviously made an impression where I was just like, this is He's going hard here. Like,
I think for me, it was definitely one of the Clark Nova scenes, but
Yeah.
probably the first one where he's in the interrogation room, and the cops. Okay, well, yeah.
he just kind of, oh, stop, dude.
One-
Like,
yeah,
peeks
like,
over.
One more thing, like thematically, thought-wise, like the cops bring him in to question him about this substance that he's been supposedly supplying to others and using as a
Yeah.
controlled substance, and they're like, "Oh, we have okay, so you kill bugs with this? Well, we have a bug of our own that maybe you can deal with." And they bring out this box, and the Clark Nova just crawls out and is depicted in that scene as fully as a bug,
Yeah.
and then he tries to kill it in the end. Was them presenting that as a bug or something to take care of? Like, were they taking out a typewriter? Were they taking out a bug? Were they presenting like
Or
there's yeah? This is
or
just
like a kind of like some conspiracies of authority figures supplying drugs to people to encourage whatever they want out of it. Was that them being like, oh, here's this, like, aha,
Supplying.
yeah,
yeah. So I think my favorite scene was that first one with Clark Nova where he crawled out and he started talking. That's when I really like leaned into the movie. And was
so it's
just
like, so this is where we're going now.
yeah, like okay,
That was the
this-
real
I
beginning
was
of
wondering
like
if
where
you
it was
guys'
going.
reaction when either that happened or you saw the model,
Yeah,
and then I'd be like, you guys then, because you guys are like,
seriously love those goddamn mugwumps.
yeah,
That's such a cool
Which is-
design.
Is that word has a meaning.
Oh yeah, I
It's a
when Mugwump
it's a
came up, I was
Native
like,
American word.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
what is
Before
that?
this, it was popularized in politics as being people who kind of ride the fence.
Yeah.
Um,
In the interzone.
The
Yeah.
interzone.
Right.
And he talks about the like.
It's
did
an-
he say,
it's-
like America's always evil, like the root of like before before we were here, before the Native Americans were
Yep.
here, this land was just evil.
Mm-hmm.
and that was a thing with Burroughs. Was he always thought of this ugly, evil spirit that existed that he wanted to kill, essentially.
So he left America,
Yeah.
or got away from America for a bit.
The word mugwump is from the Algonquin word mugquamp, which meant important person / kingpin, or from mugumquamp, which meant war leader, implying that they were sanctimonious or holier than thou.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they are like transcendent.
Mhm.
They just gods among men.
Yeah.
Well, and it's think about heroin. Like heroin users probably see that as their like a god to some point, where it is holier than thou. Like they
Yeah.
need to tune into that to be a part of this zeitgeist and this like whole mentality.
Higher being or being part of something larger than themselves. Or-
Yeah, it's
Right.
like you drink the Kool-Aid and all of a sudden you're tuned into this radio frequency where you're like picking up the signals from heaven or from like this higher place, and you're like, oh my god, my entire mind's being blown right now.
Yeah, it's just like midichlorians.
Here's a fun little idea. I posed a
Oh, yeah.
question to these two gentlemen before we started recording any of this, and I asked them because Tyler had described this somewhat as a horror movie, and I would agree to a point. I asked them to think of
Body horror.
a
Yeah.
scenario or a premise for a horror type movie that you would not normally see. And we're going to kind of dive into that a little bit. We're going to start with Eric because I specifically tried to get him thinking about this right before.
Yeah,
watching the movie.
and I should have known going into a Cronenberg thing that this was gonna like, my idea would end up getting somehow like, not like,
Influence.
well, no, like my idea came before like this, but the prevalence of buttholes and butthole analogies was nuts. Like I said before, like it's a stereotype. I think buttholes are hilarious, and anyway, so I should have known there was gonna be butthole things in this movie, but I didn't think about it. But mine was a because I didn't try to think of something new because I was paying attention to the movie a lot. But it was like, what if like your essentially your butthole is a portal, Like it was a portal to another, and things were coming out of it type of situation.
It's the inner zone.
The
not
inner
inter,
zone, yeah.
Inner.
Yeah, essentially. And it was yeah, and then I wanted to dive deeper into the idea, but I quickly got sidetracked from the movie. But
I can understand.
but then fucking our boy fucking Nova came in, and I was like, well, he's got a butthole for a mouth. And then he goes into the whole asshole diatribe, and I was just like, son of a bitch.
Well, I mean,
But yeah.
homosexuality, assholes. You know,
Yeah.
They're, and I'm not trying to be crude.
No.
They're like is a connection.
Yeah, there's a connection there. But yeah, it was like a Portal 4. I didn't quite come up with what was gonna come out of it, like what the beings were, if they were gonna be evil things, or if it'd be even weirder and be like a heaven portal where it was like angels just like, what's up, dog? But like,
Angels in the butthole.
what's up, dog?
Angels in the outfield. Angels in the butthole.
On the third fart, he came again.
Angels in the outhole. At the end.
But yeah, like, yeah, it was.
That's some JGL doing the Danny Glover on the mound, just wafting in front of his nose, like, get that butthole stink out of here.
Yeah, oh, god damn it. But yeah, that was where my idea was heading before I got real sidetracked.
If there was a movie about butthole portals,
Yeah.
give us a general outline of that movie, like 3-act structure, like how do things play out with a butthole portal being the horror element. Too much?
That's I would assume the first inkling would be like the person waking up in the middle of the night and there's like a trail of blood like coming out of his bed.
He follows into his own ass.
yeah,
He
essentially.
like walks around the room following this blood trail, and then he sees it on his ankle, and he like follows it up the back of his thigh, and like
Yeah.
up to his own asshole, where he's like doing a goat scene in the mirror.
And there's like
oh, God,
there's
it's
like
my butthole.
there's like tiny little footprints coming out of it and stuff down his leg.
Where are these why are these tiny footprints?
Yeah, because it's the thing that comes out of his butthole
So it's just a
through the
random-
portal, and he's
I thought it
walking
would
down
just
his
be
leg.
Random things coming out of the butthole.
Well, it could be.
Like Fooly Cooly, it's just like random.
Yeah, it could be random shit, or it could be random items, objects, beings, little fucking weird little weird monster dudes. Like you just little, all sorts of stuff, dude. Plants. All sorts of things. You can turn it into a weird Jack and the Beanstalk thing, except the beanstalk's coming out of his beehole. You don't know, but but yeah, act one would be like that's how he discovers something's amiss, right?
Little pitter patter.
Yeah, here's something in the middle of the night, and he wakes up and sees the little blood trail and the little feety prints and stuff.
Like a tiny person feet, or
I don't know.
I think it would be like it would be funny if it was like the borrowers.
Yeah, just little tiny dude feet. Just a little. That'd be hilarious.
Little leprechauns in your ass.
That's a whole nother fucking pot of gold analogy there. But second act,
Something has to go wrong in the second.
something has to come. It already started going on.
He starts,
I would
he starts throwing things in the portal instead of things coming out.
trying to plug it up.
Well, he's throwing like weapons and shit, and it's like
Well, I was gonna say like
dimension where,
people
like,
start like dying and shit
we go inside the portal. And we
from like a.
dimension.
People start dying from like a being poisoned, but it's a poison that doesn't exist here.
There you go.
And it's something that these little tiny bastards are bringing through the portal to try their world on the other side of the portal has been decimated and destroyed, and they need a new world, so they're coming through that butthole portal
Dark matter.
using dark matter to travel through this dude's dark matter
Yeah.
and to bring this like poison whatever to try and wipe out the indigenous population and take over. And that's why you have other things like random objects and plants coming through portals too. It's because they're trying to bring stuff from like that they've managed to save from their from their universe and bring it over
How does
or from their
what's
planet.
the resolution here?
The resolution, there's going to be there's
Is there a resolution?
Old plants. I don't know, dude. I'm coming up with this on the spot right now.
Like, I
I
have
like yours. I don't even want to do mine.
I have some idea in my head of a movie that actually was made of like an idea like that, like
The Borrowers?
Or something like that, where like at the very end of the movie we cross over into this fictitious world and it's like presents all these new things and then it's done immediately.
Right.
There's something like that where
I'm sure there is.
somebody crosses over and we're like, oh my god, what's happening? Credits. Like,
Yeah.
because
they
we enter into the butthole, we see this whole hellish fucking brown world.
It's at the end of Jet Li's The One,
Yes.
where he goes to that prison planet and then it's over.
It's towards the end of 2001 where they're doing the Jupiter.
Yeah.
They're going through past Jupiter and he's going through the light
Yeah.
shit and it just ends there.
It's just, ugh. But there becomes this conflict of these people, while what they're doing is like inherently like bad, they're trying to survive and keep their culture and their people alive.
But here's the twist.
So it becomes a what do we do? Like, or do we really want to be responsible then for taking out this entire civilization of people? And then it's the conflict of, well, they're trying to do that to us, and like this weird like fucking back and forth.
Here's where it gets crazy.
Okay, what's the climax?
I'm just saying here's a good twist.
Okay,
The whole time,
the whole time.
the whole
Yeah,
WH,
yeah,
we're talking about people coming out of this portal.
yeah.
It's our
Porthole.
dimension. We were coming out of the portal.
That's
we
what-
were watching it from another alien species point of view.
Is that what happens when we die? We cross over through the butthole into this so
You
we
get
cross
pooped out by
into the butthole
greater
in
being.
Our reality right now, like as if we're making this podcast, we die, we cross over out of the butthole into whatever world that is. Yeah.
So you're saying you're saying like the people and the stuff that's coming through
We're
is
the main character.
the human
let's say,
race.
The main character that we're following.
Dwayne Johnson.
It's not revealed that they were. It's not revealed to us until the very end that they were the alien species, and like us, we
Yeah.
came from Earth. Like
Trying to
it's like
survive.
the Twilight Zone where that happens.
That's a very human thing to be like, fuck all your shit, we're wiping it out and replacing it with ours.
Yeah, that's us. That's what we
Yeah.
do. So
So it's like-
we're hurting the alien race, and we feel bad
We're-
that we're doing that.
We're basically coming out of, they're like giants, and we're just because
Yes.
we got the little tiny little feet prints.
Yes.
So,
So we are the borrowers.
yeah, we're the borrowers. Coming out of a giant's butthole portal.
The burrowers. We burrow
Different.
In that butthole?
There's a movie called The Burrowers, and there's one called The Borrowers. They're
I don't know
very
about
different.
burrowers. I
They're
was talking
very
about
different.
like, we're coming out of a hole. The burrowers.
But yeah, and then what would the conclusion be? Would it be like the human race is resigned to the fact of like they come to their senses and like, we can't do this to somebody else, and then just resign to the fact that they're gonna get wiped out? No pun intended, because it's butthole related.
No, it would be like
Wiped out.
somewhat like the end of the Iron Giant, where like one person on our side is like discovered what's going on, and he's like, "We gotta end it. We gotta destroy it now."
What if the only person that
Where's the giant man? Like, where's the hole, man? Like,
what if the only person who has figured out
screw you guys.
the only person that has figured out how to fix what's going on that planet is the person whose butthole is the portal, but in order to fix it they have to actually go there, so there's this like paradox of how do I get there, and that's like, yeah, like trying to some weird like Ouroboros like fucking, and it creates like a fucking singularity that just resets time.
This is a bizarre horror movie.
Dude, it's a sci-fi horror.
It does sound like a Event Horizon.
Yeah.
Okay, well, mine is probably gonna fall somewhat into the same category then,
Okay.
because mine.
Do yours. I'm not gonna do it.
Okay.
Doesn't have as many butthole puns as mine does.
Eric somewhat said I wanted to jump on it.
Fair enough. Mine is less.
It was a group effort.
Not to be derogatory, crass.
Yes.
But it's
Can't spell
sort of
crass
like-
without ass.
My idea is that it's sort of like It Follows.
Yeah.
Where there's at the beginning there's one singular entity that is kind of the antagonist or like the monster of the movie, but all it is just like a clear human shape that is completely out of focus.
Yeah.
Like
Holy shit.
it's like
That's scary.
There's
Yeah.
one figure in this movie that is always out of focus, and whenever it talks, it's like
Out of focus, inaudible.
so
Yeah.
it's trying to communicate and stuff, and anybody that it touches also becomes out of
Right.
focus, where then it becomes kind of like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, where this person is like going to school and just walking through the crowds of the hall. There's like 5, 6 people that are just like out of focus walking around.
Is it?
Now to, like,
Well,
see someone
it
in the
it
dark.
it what it evokes to me is the idea of someone being like caught between like realities, like someone who's not like firmly in one or the other. They're like caught in between, and that's why it's all like unfocused and inaudible. Like they're there, but they're not. Like a weird like vibrational thing.
And
I'm imagining that effect you can put.
It'd be spooky.
Photoshop where you can like I did for you, and
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
I twirled your face.
Yeah.
I was imagining doing that and having that be the like instead of blur, they'd be warped.
Right.
In a weird way, so they're like walking at you with like a warped face. So, like, they keep like twisting, but not
Or-
with the Spanish fleas.
Yeah.
or we warp their entire like we see the entirety of this figure, and then from the feet to the ankles is normal, but then at the ankles it starts that warp, so the entire, not just the face but the entire body, like their shins up to their hips, and then that continues like,
Yeah.
into just this curly cute
Like a twisted
kind of-
man.
yeah.
That could be super creepy because
Yeah.
distorting your face in that video was hilarious because it is slow and you're
Yeah.
just like,
Just like kept exaggerating my smile and just kind of pulled it into a like,
and then like yeah, you could see me like stretching your face.
Yeah.
And then like when you did,
yeah.
it inversed everything, so it's like
Hot up. Hello?
Think about this though, like just picture young girl who's maybe like the girlfriend of the main character or the main character who is like in her room. She's been going through all this horrifying stuff and is finally like getting confronted at the very end. She's like huddled in her room directly across from her door. Door blows open and slams against the wall, and outside of that is just a dark hallway, and we can barely see a dark figure at the very end that is still out of focus but still shrouded in darkness. Like how
What if there's a really super turbo thin like halo of like not well light, but not like bright light, just like
focus.
just enough to see that there's like a difference, like there's that there's a
Like,
slight but not
try and-
exaggerated, just a little tiny.
Trying to think of something like if I have a hallway right here.
Yeah.
If all this was just all the lights off and you saw somebody standing at the end of the hallway,
Yeah.
but they were also out of focus.
Right.
How I don't think
Unnerving
your eyes
that would be.
able to like adjust that.
No, yeah, it's
To,
just
like,
it'd be a constant like
like your iris is just going to be like
focusing.
Yeah.
trying, and it would be cool to play with camera tricks like that.
Right.
Like rack focus, but then the singular subject stays the same focus the entire time.
Right.
So we start in soft focus up front, and then there's characters in the background. We way back here, but this one figure in the midground has stayed in like a specific focus the entire time. And, like you could just play with the camera so much.
Right.
Or if they were like
So-
Hollow Man, like underwater in a pool, but you still see an outline of an out of focus figure like
Right.
in the water. Or
Would
something.
would the entity or being be like nefarious, or is it that like I was saying, of someone caught in between, like someone or something that's in trouble and is trying to escape the situation they're in?
It's that, but
That
that
turns out it's us the whole time.
Bum, bum,
You
bum.
like my twist so far?
like it would be kind of what you're talking about, where the entity would be somebody who's unaware that they're horrifying other people.
Yeah.
But they are so
Determined.
unable to communicate
yes.
what they're trying to do, and it's not obviously like they're so mindless of like, oh my god, please fucking help me. They
Yeah.
don't know that they're fucking up the rest of the world.
Yep.
But to us, it's so dramatic and like horrifying. What they're
Yeah.
doing. They're like a mindless machine, like the Terminator or something.
Right.
Or like the thing,
Singular focus.
where it's just like you don't know their intentions, but what they do is so driven
Yep.
and so like focused that it's just like
It's
just
frightening
wanting
how
somebody
they
to connect with because it's on its own and it can't communicate.
Right.
but
Because
it's
talking
trying to connect and communicate with other people is just infecting and destroying this other world.
I
Right.
would like to see a scene where two characters are talking and they're walking on the side.
And that's what ghosts are in real life.
They're walking
what?
in like crisp, clear, no blurs, focus on
Yeah.
them. And in the background, you see out of focus people like mowing their lawn and shit.
Right.
So that plays with you as like a watcher, like looking for the blurry person, but the
Yeah.
background's always blurry. So you're watching these characters walk towards you, and then they look behind them, and then the camera focuses to like people mowing, and they're in focus. And
Right.
now our main
Or you
character-
see
and
someone,
there's
or you
some-
see.
there's some
figure
random
not
guy.
not moving, just an outline of a person not moving, and that outline is still out of focus, and you're like, what the fuck
Yeah.
is going on with the camera? Like, what is happening on screen right now?
Yeah, and you're like, he's right next to the really in focus guy
Right.
mowing his lawn.
Well,
What the
you-
hell's going on?
The
You
guy
think of
mowing
the-
his lawn moves behind that figure and like goes through that focus and then comes back out like normal.
And
I
the-
think it'd be fun to like
the
play with
potential-
imagery.
The potential reveal of that being someone like trapped and like how they got there type of situation of like seeing a person and then all of a sudden they just like start going out of focus and start
They're, like,
warping
talking, but then they start going like that.
while everything else around them is in focus and shit. Yeah, and then they're dampening, their voices dampens
Yeah,
as
like,
they're
I imagine
transitioning.
I imagine it being like Big Hero 6 kind
Yeah.
of a reveal where at the very end we see like footage of the lab of this experiment of them trying to like reach out to the other side of like
Right.
maybe it's they're trying to reach out to the afterlife.
Right.
And the main
But it's just the other
technician
reality.
or, you know, the person in the lab is like turns the knob and then the portal explodes or something, like hits them, and then they
Yeah.
come out of focus and they reach out to try and like, oh my god, help me,
Help,
and they
yeah,
infect
help,
the next
help.
person. Yeah. Like,
I found the next movie that I want you guys to watch. I do not own it, but we have to find it. So,
Okay.
what's the title?
Time Crimes.
Time Crimes.
Can we watch Time Bandits? That movie legitimately scared me as a kid.
Really?
Time Cop.
With the like tall skeletal.
We'll do a theme month of all movies with time in the title.
robed-
You'll like this because
Time
it's-
Crimes, Time Cop.
Time Crimes is an Italian film, and if you haven't seen it,
No.
you should, because it's like a prerequisite for like a good time travel
Yeah.
kind of story.
I'm down.
It's actually pretty interesting how they shoot it and how it's all done.
What's that one movie that takes place mostly in one room the whole time?
Rope?
No, I don't think it was that. It was a sci-fi movie.
Without describing more, I wouldn't be able to tell you. There's a few that are like
It's just pretty much two dudes the whole time. Primer, there it is. Yeah, that's
It's
what I'm
not
thinking
really
about.
in a whole room.
I know. I was just trying to think of that movie.
They use a storage facility.
Yeah.
For their time machine.
Yeah.
And, that one's even more bonkers
Yeah.
because it's way more scientific and in depth.
I wrote this down during the movie. This wasn't my like cheat on another horror idea movie. This will probably resonate with you more, Bradshaw.
Mhm.
There's that Gorillaz song off of Demon Days.
Yeah.
Narrated by Dennis Hopper.
Fire coming out of a monkey's
Fire coming
head.
out of a monkey's head.
Yeah.
That's a really fun story. Like
That's
thematically what
yeah.
it deals with and the subject.
It's heavy too.
Yeah, it'd be kind of interesting to see that fleshed out a little more
Yeah.
into an actual like 12-minute short movie or
Right.
like something like that, where it's like not a whole lot of dialogue.
Right.
Maybe even include the Dennis Hopper narrative.
Right.
But then like split that up and show a little bit visually.
Or just include the song in the end credits, so it's like a recap of what just happened.
Yeah, and like, do you know anything about that song or the story that he tells?
I remember listening to the song. I haven't listened
It's
to it.
basically like an analogy of an invading force and
Yeah, like there's this indigenous people that pray to this mountain that they call
monkey.
And they know that like this mountain is where all good souls go to rest when they die. And then all of a sudden one day these people show up and they're like hiding themselves and not talking to anybody and being very secretive, and they start mining the mountain. And the people indigenous to this place are like, oh, this is bad, something bad's gonna happen, but they still pray to the mountain because they know that it like protects them in some way. And then all of a sudden one day the mountain explodes because it's a volcano or something, and
Due to their like mining and
yeah,
shit.
they're mining and they're interfering, and everybody dies. Everybody. Nobody's
Yeah.
saved. There's no particulates in this. Everybody dies. I think even the entire world or even universe gets
I don't
put it out. But the way that the story is told and the way that Dennis Hopper, his inflection of things is it's a very powerful story in the 2.5 or not even that minutes that it's delivered.
Yeah.
There's this other song by this really good artist where it's 12 minutes long that I think would be awesome to be put to a video.
Mm-hmm.
It's Albuquerque by
Weird Al. Yeah, but, I was thinking of because you were saying songs, and I was like, I want to see 2112 as a movie. The Rush song, the like 20-minute long Rush song. It's just about it's a dystopian it's a dystopian future where all self-expression is. I saw the movie, but yeah,
They go into,
yeah.
like, there's 3 chapters that are like one of the eggs is inside of a world that is based on the lore of 2112, where there's like the Temple of Sirius
Yeah.
and the priests and
Yeah.
all of it is fleshed out in that book. I think you would enjoy that part.
Yeah, because it's like all self-expression's gone and whatever, and it's ruled by the priests in their high-tech temple with computers and shit, and
They go
part of the
into
Solar
private
Federation, and the main character finds a guitar and like it's like, oh shit, this is tight. I want to go show this to the priests, and they're like, nah, it's nothing. Just don't worry about it. Like it's just a waste of time, like whatever. And he's just like, nah, dude, this is cool. And they're like, no, and it incites this conflict. And then ends with some people from space, part of the Solar Federation or whatever, or so, I don't know. But they come down and it's like, it ends with a voice of all planets of the Solar Federation, all planets of the Solar Federation. We have assumed control. We have assumed control. It was just like, so they fleshed that out in Ready Player One, huh?
In the book, yes.
Interesting.
There's a.
I still have
good
your
chunk
copy of
book.
it.
Yeah. I think Steve has my copy.
Nope, I have it.
Just like you have my volume 5 of Akira.
Yep. You gave it to me around the same time as that. Maybe before. I think you gave it to me before you left Fargo. So, around.
My suggestion for the next movie that we watch is going to be Legion, the threequel to Exorcist. There was there was a second movie, but it wasn't based on any of Blatty's books.
Yeah, because it went Exorcist, Exorcist 2, Exorcist 3.
Legion. But it's the second book that is a direct sequel to The Exorcist, written by Blatty. And the movie was actually written by Blatty, I think. Because it wasn't.
So the
directed by
third
Steve.
one.
He might have even directed Legion.
So it's the third one released in movies, but it's the second book.
The only sequel, only real sequel
to The Exorcist.
The Exorcist. And it actually, like, the movie is similar to the movie adaptation of The Exorcist, where it deals with a lot of the same themes and explores them, but not to the same degree as the book does.
Yeah.
I just think that'd be another fun one to kind of divulge our analytical minds into the themes and the ideas and picking apart some of the other stuff, because there is actually a lot of like fun stuff to play with in that movie,
Right.
But it is also kind of a huge mess at the same time,
Right.
Yeah. So it's fun to.
So there's a lot of things that could be talked about and seen.
Yeah,
it's a good idea.
So kind of wrapping this up, I hope
Yes.
everybody enjoyed this most recent iteration of Reel to Reel. I hope that you guys
And
found something interesting to latch onto in this whole discussion.
I think what might become our signatures at end of episode introductions of who we are.
That's true. We can.
Whatever.
I like just starting, like how we do it digressions.
Yeah.
We just start.
Just go.
We just go because people would know, and we do say each other's names throughout.
Yeah.
But yeah, if we're gonna be legit about it,
Yeah.
we can be nitpicky about. We should stay to the.
Or we can credit ourselves in text.
That's
before
true.
It starts. Because I agree. I mean, I get it. We should let people.
I was just making a joke of like, well, that should be a signature. Is just we wait to introduce ourselves to the very end of the episode.
I usually been saying like, well, I've been Tyler.
Yeah, exactly.
I've been Wilson.
And I've been Eric.
And we'll probably end it there.
Yeah.
And I hope you guys enjoyed this one. It was probably one of our longer ones.
Oh yeah,
'Cause
definitely.
This one was a big one to talk about.
I don't
Yep.
even know what time.
Especially once we went into our movie ideas too.
Yeah,
About an hour.
I don't.
and a half.
I in some of our previous episodes, we might have run out of steam for like meaty content about the movie to talk about, which is why we started divulging into that huge religion thing with
Yeah.
Speed Racer. But that was more based upon.
But
like,
we had a lot of black meat for this one.
Oh yes, and I think this black meat is going to keep me hooked.
Dun dun dun
For a little
dun.
bit.
You gotta add more to your curriculum now.
Yeah.
After doing more house diving.
Would it be more burrow? No, I can't. I can't. Like, I can't split myself between house and this. It's either got to be one or the other. And right now, it's gonna be house. It's gonna be house. Just like.
It's a little more attainable, I think.
It's way more fun.
Yeah.
And it's more like solid, where this is very metaphysical and very like thoughty and idea based.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And yeah, we'll see you in the next installment.
Yep.
It'll be a surprise what we watch.
Yep.
What kind of chicken do you want to be? What kind of chicken do you want to see? Cluck, cluck around the barn, cluck, cluck around the hen. Make a rooster, make a crow, make an egg, make it snow. Do-da-do-da-do-da-do-da-do-do. You can cut anytime I'm trying.
Brown.